In this video, I talk a bit about how the U.S. Confronts the efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change through a national security lens. And there's a number of different published reports that the U.S. Army just came out with, and other parts of the defense establishment in the U.S., as well as think tanks, to try to observe and assess where we are and what their capabilities are, what challenges are likely to come forward. They also, this U.S. Climate strategy that just came out several months ago, starts also by defining the terms climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, similar to the other readings that we've covered so far in my definitions. The recent fourth national climate assessment, I think it came out in February of 2022, talks about how the impacts climate changes are having, the risks there are, and the adaptation processes the necessary, as well as the potential mitigation efforts. Starts with the connections to the current state of knowledge about the science, about what's likely to happen according to several different potential scenarios for U.S. average temperature raises. You can see the Southwest and the South being harder hit in some scenarios compared to others, and just the effects that might have would be increasing the types of fires that we talked about several weeks ago, connecting it to how a lot of these factors can interact with each other. I mentioned earlier how the size and scale of what the U.S. military does is quite unprecedented. This map kind of shows the defense assets that are susceptible to multiple kinds of climate vulnerabilities that go all the way from Alaska to Florida, Puerto Rico, and everywhere in between. And then the efforts to try to mitigate those potential challenges at state levels through the kind of carbon pricing or caps that we talked about before, push towards renewables, transportation issues, greenhouse gases, those kind of things overlapped, where a lot of these cities working towards some of these mitigation activities. The new Chapter 16 talks about the effect on U.S. International interests from an economic perspective, from an overall development and human assistance perspective, as well as a national security perspective there with the third element. But I think there is a broader and deeper effort to try to recognize the size and scale of the issues, as well as use some of the technological innovations that are potentially possible to reduce the risk to national security. I think with the Russia and Ukrainian conflict, it kind of shows the difficulty in supply lines to be able to maintain conflicts over longer periods of time. And fuel is often one of the bulkiest and most expensive things to actually bring to a front line. And so if you can develop the capabilities through vehicles or other ways of transport to be able to reduce the use of fuel, the stronger your military would be, and the more reduced susceptibility to having those supply line difficulties that Russia seems to be having right now. Other U.S. efforts that might not be as directly related to the military. One example that I could think of was the sulfur dioxide cap and trading system. This goes back a lot further. Going back to 1990, the U.S. Clean Air Act amendment, brought about underneath a Republican president, George Herbert Walker Bush, created a permit system at ending acid rain. I don't know if you've ever heard about acid rain before, but it was something when I was growing up was seen as an issue in which you had toxins getting into the water, carbon dioxide, that ended up being damaging to health and to infrastructure, and it was seen as a success, kind of similar to the efforts to try to reduce chlorofluorocarbons in the global system, which we're going to talk about next week. But by 2007, the level was down of sulfur dioxide, down 43% from 1990 levels. So this was an effort at a national level that provided a cap and trade system that overall capped and reduced the amount of sulfur dioxide that could be produced, and it was seen as being successful at a national level. A number of state efforts rely on national capacity as well. Overall, Australia and the U.S. has the state capacity. The militaries have the capacity to be able to mitigate and to adapt to the kind of risks that are likely to face. Unfortunately, a lot of the countries that we focused on in this class so far this semester do not have the same kind of resources that Australia or the U.S. might have, and that's why I thought with the last part of today, I would focus on Nepal, a country that doesn't have the economic tools and the ways that you can try to mitigate and to adapt to these kind of changes given the capacity that some of these developing states have. So I have the link here to this Deutsche Welle video that shows the importance of governance and reducing corruption to being able to actually spend the aid that the government gets from international actors, as well as the recent local elections that just happened within the last couple of days in Nepal, similar to the Philippines. We just had another child take over from his father in the Philippines as president, similar to Turkmenistan we saw earlier this term. So let's turn now to the Nepali background videos and end today with a discussion about adaptation and mitigation efforts in Nepal.